It should be there.
Okay, well, we'll go with it. We'll go with it.
Uh-oh, there goes my screen too.
Yeah, we're okay, but you're flashing on and off.
What?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the hard, it must be the hardware. Yes, you guys, all your things are okay with me. But you don't hear me loudly on my speaker here?
We do now on that, on there.
Yeah,
Okay, wait, hang on a second, hang on. Do you hear me now? Do you hear me now?
yes.
Yes,
You hear me?
yes.
You hear me? Okay.
I guess we don't need to see you.
You're like watching a famous light show.
Yeah.
Just don't get sick.
That's better.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Oh, Lowell
Oh.
turned me off.
Oh, you're gone. Oh, there you are.
There you go.
Yeah, Lowell turned off the camera part. Like that.
Okay.
We got the old computer here. We bought two new ones, but neither of them did what we wanted to. So Lowell had sent them back. He's working on it. On the old one here, he bought a new camera, an external camera. And so we thought we'd bypass whatever the problem was on the internal camera, and not there.
Not there.
Nope.
The hard way. The devil is in the details here. Anyway, okay, so, hey, we're still in the introduction to the book of Genesis. You know, last week we talked a little bit, I kind of did an overall review of the, of the book. You know, I made light of the proposed, headlines that could have come out of that time, but they're not a bunch of nice people. You know, we think, well, they're God's people, therefore they're nice people. And they're not, and we're not. And, we have the same issue all the way down the line. One thing about the book of Genesis is that when we get in, you get chapters 1 and 2, and we get the creation, and then we get to chapter 3, and we have the fall, and people don't realize how much that upset everything. I mean, absolutely. You know, we say that COVID changed everything. COVID changed everything. You know, it's nothing compared to what the fall did. Okay, and so when people say, well, how can you believe in a God who created a world that has, and I'm sure you've all heard it, my son has cancer, whatever, this, that, whatever. That isn't the world that God created. But what you have to do is you have to go to the end of the book. They always say, well, I've read the end of the book, so I know what happens. But you read the very end of the Bible in Revelation 21 and 22. And it speaks about how God restores everything. The new heaven, new earth, what heaven looks like, the tree of life sitting in the middle there, the river of life flowing, all of that stuff. And that's what we have to, that's what we have to realize is that Genesis is the beginning. Genesis, we'll see next week probably, but we'll see that everything was good, everything got corrupted. But one day everything will be good again. Who's Jesus? See, I told you, all things would be restored. We didn't think we had enough. I'm sure that Revelation 21:22 talks about the abundance of cinnamon rolls. Hey, I'm the teacher up here. I can make this up as I go along. Anyway. So on your handout, the same handout last year. Everybody have a handout? I have more. Everybody doesn't have a. If anybody doesn't have a handout, there's more there. Anyway, so at the beginning there, we got into some of this last week. I don't remember. I thought I made a mark when we ended last week, but I couldn't find it on my paperwork. Well, it says book of beginnings. So that's what Genesis, that's what Genesis is. In fact, I got a note here. The Hebrew word is Bereshit. Okay, what they do is they take the first word of a book, just like in the first 5 books of, Moses, and they take the first word, and that becomes the title of the book. So Bereshit is in the beginning. Okay, in the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Old Testament, is Genesios. You need to hear from that sound there is where we get Genesis. The Latin Vulgate, which was translated from the Greek into Latin or Hebrew into Latin, is Liber, Liber, Genesios, which is the book of Genesis. The book of Genesis. And in English, we call it, come on, Genesis, book of Genesis. Well, you give an easy one. So that we understand also, the first 5 books of the Bible are called the Torah. Okay? I'm sorry, the Bible's called the Torah. The Pentateuch is the first 5 books. And like I said, they're each named after that first word. So in the beginning becomes in the beginning. And I've got the foundation of history. I think some of these we covered last week. It gives the origins, in this book of Genesis itself, the origins of the universe, the solar system, Earth, life on Earth, and humanity. It gives the origin of marriage. We'll see in chapter 2, when God pronounces marriage for Adam and Eve. Talks about sin, death, shame, and the atonement in chapter 3. The beginning of religious worship is in chapter 4, and that's the story of Cain and Abel, and they bring sacrifice. And what is acceptable sacrifice? What is acceptable worship? And that was part of Pastor's, message today. Yeah. So we see those things, beginning there. Human innovation. If you're reading chapters in chapter 4, 5, in there. It says so and so who invented the violin. I don't know if it was a violin, but a musical instrument. And so who invented, the chainsaw. Whatever it is, but introducing, who invented tools, certain music, certain, whatever in there. Later on, it speaks about the creation of the origin of cities and nations. Of language, that language in chapter 11, where you've got the Tower of Babel, and then where he divided up the languages when he scattered the people. And then the big one is in chapter 12, where it's the origin of God's covenant people, Israel. Not the covenant, but when he calls out Abraham, and you'll see that it'll probably be several weeks down the road, but when he calls out Abraham, and he makes promises to Abraham. I choose you, and the blessings will be for land, for many people. People will, come seek you out and, get a blessing out of you. I guess that's a better term. But that's the beginning of that. And then from 12 to 50, chapters 12 to 50 is the carrying out of God's promises and God's covenant with the nation of Israel. So all that's in there. What are there? See, the roots of all subsequent revelation are found in Genesis. Characters introduced, this is all in your notes here. Characters introduced in Genesis are mentioned in dozens of biblical books. How many times do you see in the Old Testament and New Testament they refer back to Abraham, Isaac, Jacob? They refer to the flood. They refer to Adam and Eve in the New Testament. The same thing. We've got here that Genesis is quoted over 60 times in 17 books of the New Testament. And that there's more than 200 allusions to Genesis in the New Testament. So there's 60 times where, where they actually quote the book of Genesis in the New Testament, and there's 200 allusions. Who will they talk about? They don't make a quote, but if they said, just in the days of Noah, that's an allusion, it's not a quote, but it just shows how important the book of Genesis was to those, to those people. That over 100 of these allude to chapters 1 through 11, 6 of them in Christ's teaching. Now, here's the importance of chapters 1 through 11. Most of the world doesn't believe they're true. That they're made up, they're Aesop's fables, and the rest they can say, yeah, okay, I'm even talking to a lot of Christians. They say, well, yeah, from Abraham on, okay, we'll buy that. That could be historical. Maybe the stories are embellished some, but we can believe that it's historical and we can follow the line. But before that, what's it, God creating stuff and Adam and Eve in the garden, and he's just talking snake and, just on and on. But we see that, how many, I say 100 times, they allude to things that happened in those chapters, and Jesus himself did also. I mean, we'll see this later, but Jesus talks about in the beginning when he's talking about marriage, and I think it's Matthew 19. And he says, wasn't it so in the beginning when God created Adam and Eve that he created them male and female? And then he goes on to the next verse and talks about, the institution of marriage. So I don't know if Jesus was wrong. He got caught up in all this fundamentalist stuff of believing the Bible, or or what. But so a lot of people don't. So that's what's important about chapters 1 through 11.
Mhm.
Who said? Anybody? Somebody just clear their throat. Okay. Any questions? Any comments? Have any of you, all of you, heard those same stories about chapters 1 through 11, Dave?
Lida has one.
I have one. Number 3 here, you've got sin, death, shame, and atonement. Is that what, where did you get that from?
Well, it's from the promise where he says that, her seed will crush, I'll send one who her seed will crush your head or your, I forget how.
Okay,
Anybody want to read
Yeah.
Genesis 3:15? Anyway, that's the promise of the atonement. That something's going to
Okay.
happen that's going to take care of all the sin. You gotta imagine, they're just saying, oh God, we got caught eating an apple, but God's looking out at it. He just knows all the trouble. God's, what's the word? Not omnipresent. He is omnipresent. We say that, but there's a more inclusive, term. But anyway, he's always there. He's always seeing everything. He sees everything as it's happening now. There is no present, past, and future. He just sees, and he just knows. I think I've used this example before. Like if you're watching a parade go by and you've got a fence in front of you and you got a knothole, and you're watching, we look and we can only see the present. And we just see the float or the marching band that's going ahead of us that we can see in the knothole. But God, he's up in the Channel 5 helicopter. He can see the whole parade at once. He sees the parade that's gone by, because where's it gone by? It's only gone by me. It hasn't gone by wherever. He sees what I'm seeing, and he sees what's coming. So anyway, back to Lida's thing. So he sees the whole atonement. When we're in Genesis 3 and he's making that promise of crushing, Satan's head, he sees Christ on the cross. Just like the people 2,000 years ago, the Christ on the cross. And as we look back and see Christ on on the cross? So that's a good question, Mike, thank you.
You're welcome.
See, the class is more likely we'll be back.
back.
Anyway.
But he's,
Okay, but anyway, anybody else hear anything about chapters 1 through, 1 through 11, that people have a hard time believing, pastor? Good, we have a pastor. No.
No, I'm glad you brought it up because one time I preached and I said, well, if you don't believe Genesis chapter 1, and I said, if you start tearing out the pages of your Bible and it's like, okay, chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and then you start getting further in the Bible and these references and allusions and Jesus talking about these events, then rip those pages out too. And so if you're a person that just picks and chooses what you want to believe, the question really is, where's your foundation? What do you base your beliefs on? Is it the Bible? Is it all of God's word, or just the parts that you like, or things like that? And so there isn't really anything left because that's the foundation, the creation, creating a people, sin, atonement, so, but you're right. So many, even Christians will.
And we'll get into next week why Christians will doubt so easily. Okay, we'll save that for next week. Were you guys online able to hear Pastor? Okay, I just want to do a sound check, make sure the mic.
Yes,
Okay. Good.
yes.
Excellent. So far, so good. Well, the next thing I have, where did Moses get the Genesis material? I want to save that for the end, okay? Okay. Because if we run long or something like that, it'll fit in with next week also. But I want to make sure we get through this. So you got number 3 there, methods of dividing, dividing Genesis. Okay, and again, all of this is to get you comfortable with the whole book, the big book, 50 chapters. It's one of the bigger ones, in scripture. Isaiah's bigger. Anybody else bigger? Yeah, so maybe the second in the Bible. So if you look at it, how to divide up the book? I've got it here in 2 parts. And this is the easy one. You have before Abraham, chapters 1 through 11, and you have after Abraham, which are 12 through 50. But in the before Abraham, we have 4 major events that happen. It's creation, the fall, the flood, and the Tower of Babel. Okay? You say Babel or Babel? Babel? Want to say Babel? Because people babble along. Okay. Let's say Babel. Okay. After Abraham, we have 4 major characters. Okay, we have Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph. And it'll be broken down into stories about each of the families as they go. They can also break it down into 4 parts. Pre-Abrahamic history, which is chapters 1 through 11. Then you can just break it down into the life of Abraham, the life of Isaac and his sons, and the life of Joseph. And and again, those all can be compartmentalized into their own stories, but it's how the progeny gets cast into the next generation. Because remember, these people are carrying the seed of Messiah. That's what it's working at. I have 10 parts here. The books of generation. In Hebrews, it's called Toledah. Okay? And then because it's the book of generations, and we'll see on some of these how it works with generations. So in verses 1:1 through 2:4, it's going to talk about You know, the generations of the creation of the heavens and the earth. And then it's gonna speak of the generations of Adam, which is gonna go, you have the verses listed there, 2:4 through 5:1. So that's going to include Adam, Eve, gonna include the troubles, gonna include Cain and Abel, and their troubles. It's going to show how the family of Adam and Eve spread. You know, that's one of those questions. Where did Cain get his wife? Huh? Anybody ever wonder that one? Huh? Okay, so you don't lose sleep over it. No, you're gonna take it. It says, I don't know my Bible. But with the Bible, we read it every time. Somewhere in chapter 5, it says, it's gonna tell you right where you got it. That's-
You want all of chapter 5?
Look,
5, somewhere in there.
Oh, you want all of chapter 5?
no, you don't want to read it. No, just
Oh.
look.
This is the written account of Adam's line. Okay? Goes right after the Cain and Abel. When God created man, he made him in likeness of God. He created them male and female and blessed them, blah, blah, blah. That's the original Greek or Hebrew. When Adam lived 130 years, he had a son of his own likeness in his own image, and he named him Seth. That's going to be after the Cain and Abel. After Seth was born, Adam lived 800 years and had other sons and daughters. Altogether, Adam lived for 930 years. So he had other sons and daughters. Now, in those 800 years, how many sons and daughters could he have? Yeah, it could be a whole civilization, and they packed up. No, they did, and they packed up, and then they said bye to mom and dad, and they went over the hill, and they created a family, you know, there, and then their families did. I'd have to figure out how many years we're talking about. It's for the 900 from 130, you know, a whole bunch, 700. You know, like that. It's time for people to spread out. So, and I don't want to get ahead in the Cain story, but when it says you go to the land of Nod, hey, there's people there. And he's probably could be, I don't know, 14 cousins to those people. You know, and, you know, the bloodlines and the DNA wasn't, you know, corrupted from intermarriage and, you know, all of that could be fine. I mean, there was no law at that time against marrying close relatives. You know, that didn't come until Moses. So, anyway, so that's where. But all those things, just saying, but all those things are the questions people ask, and Christians don't know how to answer, that are actually explained in the scripture. You know, and so when your favorite local cousin who's an atheist says, aha, where did Cain get his wife? You know, that we don't shrivel and going to his atheist kid. Is that right?
But didn't the angels come down from heaven and marry with the daughters of Adam?
Well, don't get into that. That's in chapter 6. We'll cover that. But I'm before chapter 6. I mean, I'm still in 15. But anyway, that's the whole. That there isn't a puzzling. I mean, it's a puzzling passage. There's not a puzzling passage like asking the question, where did Cain get his wife? That's just who are those angels? You know, kind of a question, more so than that. What other questions do people say? We're going to see when we get into creation. You know, everybody says, well, surely God didn't create everything in 6 days. We all know that the earth is older than. Don't we all know that? Don't we? Joe doesn't know that. Do you believe that? No. See, that's the thing. If we're true to scripture, we know that but so many people are gonna say, yeah, but what about this old rock? So I mean, those are the kind of things, those go throughout, 1 through 11. The flood, how big was the flood? How big did all those animals on the ark? A whole bunch, right?
So you have to get past the first word, in the beginning, God. That, there was a lot of fault back to why people don't accept it because we have evolution, from who to you to.
And we'll get into that next week. Next week, I want to talk about how we read Genesis, especially Genesis 1. Do you need to open it and start reading? Or do you have to know something different? Okay, so we'll get into that. So, so then we have the generations of Noah. That's where in chapter 5 there, where we're reading it, starts those descendants of other people, and all those people become the generations that lead up to Noah, all the way to the flood. Okay, it's that generation of people. So again, we're talking about the 10 different parts that we can divide Genesis into. So you've got of Noah, then after that, number 4, you've got of the sons of Noah. You've got to remember, when they all got on the ark, there's only 8 people that got on the ark. And Noah, his wife, this is Noah, his 3 sons, and their 3 wives. And that was it. So whenever the ark landed and the water receded, now you've got the generations of the sons of Noah, because they were, what was that? Yeah. And then also we'll get into, when we get there, a little bit, play around with numbers, is how can we get to our population today? We're going by, say, a young Earth. So we're just saying here, 6,000, creation of 6,000 years ago. Can we get to subtracting the time from creation to Noah, from Noah to now? Could we get up to, what is it, 6-7 billion people? Who was in charge of counting? One of you I left in charge of counting the Earth's population. Yeah, but how many? Now? Yeah, I know. That's a lot of people. It seemed like when I was a kid. But I mean, it seemed like when I was a kid, it was like 3 people. But that was when the Earth, but that was when the Earth was only 4 billion years old. Now it's 15 billion years old. Look how we've aged. Yeah. So anyway, then you've got the generations in chapter 10, you've got the generations of Shem, which leads up to the generation of Terah. Who knows who Terah is? Abraham's dad. Yeah. Leads us up to Abraham's dad, and then so actually, when we get there, when we're talking about Abraham, it's actually called the generation of Terah, because it starts back with him, and Abraham gets caught up in that. So generations of Ishmael, generations of Isaac. Remember, Ishmael came before Isaac. Where Abraham was hoping for a son, pass on the genes. And so him and Hagar did their thing. With Sarah's blessing, because Sarah had lost her faith in what God could do. Say, well, here, take my maidservant. Then we've got the generations of Esau, and then the children of Israel, who is Jacob, that goes on. And that includes the 12 tribes, 12 brothers, 12 tribes, and goes down to Joseph. Joseph was in you know, was in Egypt. Led the people out of Canaan into Egypt. And then Moses, in the book we're not going to cover, Exodus, will lead the people out of Exodus back into the promise. Okay, so anyway, so that's another way, excuse me, to divide it up. Any questions online? Any questions here? Some I've got here, some have divided it by themes. You know, again, generations, the creation, degeneration, which is the fall and its effects that takes us up from 3 to 11. And then regeneration is again with God's covenantal intervention, where God now acts with his people in covenant and says, you're my people, I'm going to work with you in a special way. Okay? So the book can be divided. Some have divided it by geography, the events that happened in Eden, the events east of Eden, which is where Cain and Abel, you know, were. There you go. So let's see. The ark, you know, the events of the ark and Ararat. Where is the ark today?
Mount Ararat.
Who said Mount Ararat? Y'all. That isn't what the Bible says. Yeah? Bible's strange book, huh? Well, it would be in Turkey. But the Bible actually says the mountains of Ararat. You know, that's like the Rocky Mountains. So if you say, well, the ark's in the Rocky Mountains, because everybody goes, now that doesn't mean it can't be at the top of Mount Ararat, because I'm sure the top of Mount Ararat is in the mountains of Ararat, so it could be there. But everybody goes, they try to identify Ararat, and they send these expeditions out, and they go, look, a piece of lumber, that must be the ark. And it could be, I mean, it could be, I'm not saying it, but if we read the Bible closely, it says the Rocky Mountains. Of the mountains of Ararat. So just a little something. Okay, then we got the in the geography of Babel, which I didn't look it up on the map. So I've got that Babylon area, Iraq, Iran. Is that where Babylon is? I thought Babylon was Iraq. Anyway, all those countries, they're all alike, and you know, they all try to kill each other. And then you've got in Ur and in Canaan. Abraham comes out of Ur. You've got the promised land in Canaan. And then we've got Egypt, chapters 37 to 50. It's divided up, and it takes place in, you know, in Egypt. Okay? Okay, hang on to this. There's sheet stuff like that, because as you read through, hopefully if you read through, you know, on your own as you're going along, you can try to line these things up and say, aha, I do see it that way. Okay, types and shadows of New Testament things in Genesis. But you have to read these on your, you know, you have to read these on your own, kind of like a homework. But it's something that you can do, like something you can do throughout the whole, you know, through the whole study as you go along. So again, you look this stuff up, you read it, you read the corresponding passages, and you know, if you have notes somewhere else and study Bible and commentary or just something you can Google, you know, like that, it may lead you somewhere else also to look a little bit, you know, to look a little bit further into it. But in Adam and Eve has a foreshadow in chapter 2 with Ephesians 5. Adam in chapter 3. I guess I should have written down my notes a little bit so I could have commented. You know, these notes I wrote a long time ago, so now I don't totally remember. Tell you what. Let me look up the Romans 5 there, just so we can get a feel for. Well, you get a feel for what I'm saying. let's see, 5, what did it say? It said there, Adam in chapter 3 with Romans 5:14. Romans 5:14 says, for it is light that makes everything visible. This is why it is said, wake up, O sleeper, rise from the dead, and Christ will shine upon you. So I think that's in when God is approaching Adam and Eve, and when he's giving the promise of salvation, he's tying, Jesus into it. Abel in chapter 4 with Hebrews 12:24. We just got done with Hebrews, and it talked about in Hebrews 11 how Abel was one of those with faith because of the way that he offered up, offered his sacrifice to God. What does it say? 12:24. It says, Jesus, the mediator of a new covenant, and to sprinkle blood, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. Remember, it talked about Abel's blood crying out from the ground. So many things that happen in the Old Testament, I really think happened just so Jesus could say something 1,500 years later. I think I said this when we were doing Jonah in Master's Men. Is that I think, this is my weird thinking, we'll take it at that, but I think that the book of Jonah happened so that Jesus could one day say, just as Jonah spent 3 days and 3 nights in the belly of the great fish, I will spend 3 days and 3 nights. I have a feeling that's the reason why Jonah's there. Could be wrong. But I mean, I think that a lot of that stuff, again, in God's, I don't want to say foreknowledge, it's just God's knowledge, that he's got all of this stuff set out. And again, like I say, so that the writer of Hebrews, what he just said there about the blood crying out, from the ground from Adam. It's just there because otherwise Jesus had nothing to say. Like that just, I don't know. Again, could be. So we got, foreshadowing again. You have to read the passages. The ark and the flood. With those Peter passages. The Peter passages are big because in 1 Peter 3:20-21, he talks about those who rebelled way back before the flood, who got drowned by the flood. He's talking about the flood, and then how the ark saved the people that are saved, and it says he talks about this salvation now saved, or this baptism now saved. So he's relating what's happening in Genesis in the flood in that generation. In 1 Peter 3, he's relating it to baptism that saved. Okay, so you got Ishmael, Isaac. Let's see, the offering of Isaac on Mount Moriah. That's an easy one, isn't it? Do you all know that Mount Moriah is where pardon?
Calvary.
Where Calvary was, where Jesus was crucified. All right. So I mean that's an easy one to find the type and foreshadowing. Obtaining the bride for Isaac when the servant went out, to find the bride to the king. The same thing pastor does here when he preaches. Same thing you guys do when you talk to your friends and neighbors about Jesus. You're out there searching, find the bride to the king. Amen. And Joseph says, hold on. That could be related to that. Who's Jesus? Oh, Wanda.
So today, with the Dome of the Rock be on Mount Moriah?
You know. Depends who you listen to. There's a bunch of people today who are saying, you know what? We all think that the temple is where the Dome of the Rock is. You know, that's the Muslim temple. You know, that the Dome of the Rock is where the temple was, and therefore you cannot build the temple. You got to blow up the Dome of the Rock first. You know, it's created a whole bunch of problems in itself. So what they're saying is, look, if you read the scripture, again, this goes back to if you read the scriptures closely, you know, where is one of the biggest tourist things in Jerusalem? The Wailing Wall, right? You know, like that. And why is the Wailing Wall important? What's that supposed to be?
Part of the temple,
Pardon?
part of the temple.
Part of the temple. But what does the scripture say? What did Jesus say would happen to the temple?
That it would be destroyed.
Not one stone would be left. So the question comes up, is that part of the temple? You know? So here's what they're saying. Here's what they say. Is that isn't where the temple was. They say the temple was in the city of David. Now, where's the city of David? No, Jerusalem. I got wouldn't where the temple was. But they show that what was called the city of David, and I'd have to go back. We need to be talking out of that. I don't. Is that downhill from the Temple Mount? I was going to say south, but I don't know better. What direction is it? That there is a city that apparently was called the city of David. And so they go and they say, look, this is where the temple was. We don't need to blow up, you know, the Dome of the Rock. So, how do you know? And the thing is that people have so much invested in all this temple stuff that you probably, if it wasn't at where the Dome of the Rock is, you're not going to convince them it was where the city did, because they got too much invested in up on the Temple Mound. But I thought it was interesting. I was watching the thing. I thought it was interesting. Yeah, how is there a wall still standing? Because Jesus said there wouldn't be. And the Roman history talks about when Titus destroyed the city, that it was all torn down. You know? Yeah, I mean, you know, it sounds like it was a total done deal. But then we have this, but I don't know. Homework project for you all, right?
But it's like you were saying that Mount Ararat is like the Rocky Mountain. We was trying to pinpoint where the landed at. But also the same thing with Mount Moriah and Mount Calvary. They're saying the same thing, but they measured it something like 300 meters from one to the other. So
Wow.
then they're the same thing. No, they may or may not be. And it's the same thing with the wailing with the Dome of the Rock being exactly on top of where the other one was at. And it said, no, archaeological sites now say that, no, it's like Indiana Jones. They're digging in the wrong place.
Right.
And it's the same thing with this. They don't know exactly where it's at.
Yeah. That one thing that I did read, again, I read the stuff or I watch something on it, and I don't go any further now because I'm not going to go over there like Indiana Jones and, you know, go do the dig. But they say that where they say the Temple Mount was, there's no water. There's no water canals for the priests to bathe in. You know, for the ceremonial washing. I don't know. Too big for this class. I mean, no. It is. Like you all have the seed now. You can go out and do the study. I mean, it doesn't make a difference for our class. There are things we'll get into that are big deals if it's this way or that way. But this one, I mean, it may be a big deal in God's plan, for this class. I'm sorry. Wait, let me do Denny.
Yeah, you know, the Odyssey of Paul, which we'll do later, there's an archaeological video of it finds a lot of these places that are unearthed and does tie into what's named in scripture. I had one other question though before
Yeah.
we leave. You've kind of taken us through the lineage of what we consider the Jewish population. What's the lineage of the Gentiles? Where'd that come from in the
Well,
beginning?
Wow. First of all, you gotta remember, there's just people. Okay, in the beginning, they're just people. Okay, now you have sons of, like, sons of Ishmael. And you have sons of, well, this is after God's already made the covenant though. So before the covenant, there's just people. There's no Jews, there's no Gentiles, just people. Okay, and you have people that are following God to the best of their knowledge, the light that they've been given. You know, there's people before Abraham's time, you know, Noah, I'm sure was saved, you know, and he's just a people, he wasn't Jewish. So you just have people. Then when you get to Abraham, God makes a covenant with Abraham to be his people. And this is important. I've said this 100 times. God's people. Doesn't even have to be Jewish or Gentile. It's God's people. You know, and God's people, I always say, once called Israel, now called the church, doesn't mean that the people aren't different. Going back to, excuse me, Noah and whoever, and you know, all the way up through Abraham, Isaac, and you know, Jacob's lines and whoever else we read these genealogies about. They're God's people. So something changed from just people to God's people. And that's in Genesis 12. Now, if we're going to say Gentiles are non-Jewish people, I guess they've always been around. But at least at the point where they make Jewish people, all the other people are non-Jewish people. And if we're going to say those are Gentiles, you know, and I think, I remember, it's a Jewish story. You know, it's not like Jewish Today story, but it's a Jewish story, and then Christ carries on that Jewish story. Because remember, you know, neither Jews nor Greeks and stuff like that. We're all God's people.
Adam wasn't Jewish,
Adam wasn't Jewish. No.
he was Gentile.
Well, he wasn't a Gentile. See, that's the thing. He was a people. He was a people. You know, and everybody was a people. See, it's what God, it's what, and it's not even what, we'll finish this. It's not even with what God did to the people. Okay? No, I shouldn't say that. It's not anything that it's not even anything God did to the people. It's what God declared of the people. You have to make that fine thing. God declared them. You are my people. Here's my covenant. You know, and you become his people because he's designated it. It's not like, you know, Little League Baseball where you go try out, you know, to get on the team. You know, hey, I think I want to join that, you know, God's people team. You know, so I'm going to go try out. You don't. You get declared as God's people. I guess that means to quit. The phone over there, whoever's phone that was. Jackie knows how to shut me up. Anyway, okay. What's that? Oh. Anyway, so, you know, I've got listed on page 4 here. Names of God in Genesis. Maybe we'll touch on this a little bit next week. But, and this creates all kinds of problems for people because God has different names in Genesis. So they say Moses didn't write Genesis. And we'll get into, that's why I wanted to save the Moses thing to last who wrote it or where to get the information. Because they say, well, no, different people wrote it. When this group of priests wrote this part of Genesis, they called him, you know, Yahweh, or they called him Elohim, or they called him, you name the name that's there. But each of these tribes that were gathering together to write Genesis at their particular time had a different name for God. And that's not true. The names of God are descriptive. They talk about who he is and what he does. That's what names of God are. You know, so it could be God's name is Ralph, you know, but he's also called the police chief because he's the police chief, you know, or he's called a man of great heroism because he does whatever great men of heroism does. You have to ask Jim what great men of heroism does because he does them every day.
His name was Andy.
No, so but this is where people get off. It's they say, well, wait, if his name was Elohim, his name should be Elohim throughout the whole book of Genesis, or if his name's Jehovah, or whatever it might be. But you can look up the references there. I mean, that's just so that you get familiar with the way it's called. I found about anybody here use Bible Gateway? Well, anyway, on Bible Gateway, you know, because Bible Gateway free version has about 100 or so different versions of the Bible, and all you do is type it in. You can look at all those different versions. There is one I found the other day called the Name of God Bible, and everywhere you look, it shows you. Because we might, you know, in English we might say Lord for a whole bunch of them, but it's actually a different, you know, word, you know, different Hebrew name or whatever. Anyway, I think it's called the Name of God. I found that very interesting. The translation looks normal. It's not some whacked out, you know, translation like some of them are, but it's just where it comes to giving God, excuse me, a name or a title, whatever it is. It has it in bold. I thought that was pretty good. So, if any of you, I mean, if any of you guys play around the computer and you do Bible studies at all on the computer, all you gotta do is BibleGateway.com. It's free. They have all kinds of different resources. I'm too cheap to pay for the good stuff. But... Okay. Any questions? Any comments? We're done. Okay, let's close with Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from Very good. Thank you all. Thank you guys who are online. I'm glad you could hear me and I could hear you. And boy, isn't life good and happy? I see that.
Hey,
Huh?
Gene, remind them about coming up to look at my car after the master amends.
Yeah, send me an email.
Okay, I will. But let the ones there know that don't go to master's men. So,
Okay.
you-
I will. Thanks.